For centuries, steel clanged, blood flowed, cities burned, and lives were destroyed in every corner of the earth. And almost always, it was a woman who sparked the war. But what if behind every great massacre there was not fatal beauty, but the powerlessness, humiliation, and fear of women whose bodies became diplomatic tools? Have you ever wondered why male historians are so fond of tales of wars for love? From childhood, we are fed a beautiful myth. Knights in shining armor go to their deaths to save a beautiful lady, and entire kingdoms collapse because of a single glance from a beauty. But let's take off our rose-colored glasses. If we strip away the layer of male romanticization from history textbooks, a shocking and brutal truth will be revealed. Women were never the real cause of wars. They were merely a convenient excuse, a bargaining chip, a human shield, or a trophy used to cover up a banal thirst for power, territory, and gold. In this section, we review ancient and medieval times, and we recall only a small part of the army of broken female destinies on which the powerful of this world built their bloody empires. Let's start with the one whose name has become synonymous with beauty. Helen of Troy is the woman whom history blames for the 10-year Trojan War. The daughter of Zeus and Leda, wife of the Spartan king Menelaus, she was either kidnapped or eloped with the Trojan prince Paris. It wasn't just an elopement, it was an insult. In the ancient world, honor meant more than life itself. The abduction or escape of a queen was a blow to prestige, to power, to the entire structure of society. For her husband Menelaus, it was public humiliation, and for his brother Agamemnon, it was the perfect excuse to start a large-scale war for control of trade routes. Troy stood at a strategic crossroads of trade routes. It was a rich city that controlled the straits and the flow of gold. Hellas envied its power. War had been brewing for a long time. All that was needed was a reason. And that reason was a woman. 10 years of siege. 10 years of blood, duels, betrayals, Achilles and Hector, Patroclus and Andromache, a wooden horse in the silence of the night, a city engulfed in flames, thousands dead, Troy destroyed, and all because a woman dared or was forced to choose another man. Doesn't this remind us of situations today where women are blamed for the consequences of men's decisions? The legend of the founding of Rome tells of the mass abduction of women from the Sabines tribe. Romulus and his companions needed wives for their new city. When all the neighboring tribes refused their lawful marriage proposals, the Romans resorted to trickery. They organized a great feast in the city and invited their neighbors. In the midst of the feast, at Romulus' signal, the Roman youths forcibly abducted all the young women who had come. The ensuing war was presented as revenge for honor, but in reality, it was a struggle for territory and resources. The Sabine women, caught between their fathers and their new husbands, became hostages to someone else's conflict. Bloody battles took away the relatives and fathers of newborn children, and then the women decided to take a desperate step. In the heat of battle, they ran out of the city, their hair disheveled and their clothes torn, holding small children in their arms, and threw themselves into the thick of the fighting. Their famous reconciliation of the warring parties was not romanticism, but a desperate attempt by women to stop the bloodshed in which they were bargaining chips. Lucretia, a Roman patrician woman, was raped by the king's son, Sextus Tarquinius. Unable to bear the shame, she killed herself in front of her husband and father. And what did the men do? They didn't just mourn her, they used her bloodied body as a political banner. The aristocrats were looking for a reason to get rid of the unpopular king, and the tragedy of Lucretia, who committed suicide out of shame, gave them moral justification for a political coup. Brutus incited the people to revolt, overthrew the monarchy, and founded the Roman Republic. The tragedy of one woman became the perfect trigger for a change in state power. Several decades after Lucretia, history repeated itself, but even more horrifically. The influential official Appius Claudius fell passionately in love with the young Virginia and decided to legally recognize her as his slave in order to possess her. Her father, unable to obtain justice through legal means, publicly slaughtered his daughter, declaring that this was the only way to preserve her honor and freedom. This monstrous sacrifice caused public outrage and led to an uprising that overthrew the tyranny of the decemvirs. Once again, a woman's body became an altar for political change. The sister of Emperor Valentinian III, Honoria, was locked up in a convent and forcibly married to an old, boring senator. In desperation, she secretly sent a ring and a request for help to Attila, the leader of the Huns. Attila, who had no interest in romance, declared it a marriage proposal and demanded half of the Western Roman Empire as a dowry. Naturally, the Roman court was horrified by Attila's demands. Emperor Valentinian III refused to recognize this marriage and give up his sister. This refusal provoked one of the most devastating barbarian invasions in history. The woman's desperate cry for help became a pretext for a continental catastrophe. According to legend, the Visigoth king Roderick raped the beautiful Florinda. Her father, Count Julian, wanting to avenge his daughter, opened the gates of Spain to the Moors. This marked the beginning of the Arab conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, which lasted almost 800 years. The girl who survived the violence went down in history as a traitor who caused the fall of Christian Spain. Historians cynically shifted the blame for male violence and betrayal onto the shoulders of the victim. The proud daughter of the Prince of Polotsk rejected Prince Vladimir, the future baptizer of Rus. In response, Vladimir captured Polotsk, killed her father and brothers in front of her, raped Ragnita, and forcibly took her as his wife. Her fate is a chilling illustration of how the formation of states was built on women's bones. Ragnita became a political trophy, cementing power over the conquered land. In the 12th century, King Dermot mac Murrough of Leinster kidnapped the married princess Derbforgail. This led to a war between Irish clans, resulting in Dermot's exile. In exile, desperate and eager to regain his throne, Dermot mac Murrough committed an act for which the Irish curse him to this day. To regain power, he sought help from the English king. Thus began the Norman invasion, which led to 8 centuries of English rule in Ireland. Derbforgail had long since returned to her husband, but the wheel of war, set in motion by her abduction, had swept away an entire nation. And here is the story that resulted in England being drawn into numerous bloody conflicts, losing vast amounts of land on the continent and ending up in a 100-year war. After the death of Richard the Lionheart, his younger brother John ascended to the English throne. He inherited the vast Anjou Empire, which included England and half of modern France, Normandy, Anjou, Maine, Touraine, and Aquitaine. To consolidate his power, John decided to dissolve his first childless marriage and find a new wife. His choice fell on the strategically important region of Angoulême, which was key to controlling Aquitaine. The only heir to the Count of Angoulême was Isabella. She was only 12 years old, but she was already famous for her incredible beauty. Her contemporaries called her the Helen of the Middle Ages. The problem was that Isabella was already officially engaged to Hugo de Lusignan, Count de la Marque. The Lusignans were a powerful, violent, and dangerous clan on the border of John's lands. John, blinded either by Isabella's beauty or by his desire to acquire her lands, made a fatal mistake. He made an agreement with the girl's father and literally stole the bride from under her fiancé's nose. The offended Lusignans did not raise a rebellion, which John could have suppressed by force. They acted more cunningly. They took him to court. Since John owned French lands as a vassal of the King of France, the Lusignans complained to Philip II Augustus about their lord John, who had stolen a vassal's bride. This was a gift from fate for Philip II, who dreamed of expelling the English from the continent. Philip summoned John to Paris to appear before the royal court. When John proudly refused, Philip II declared John a rebellious vassal and confiscated all his French possessions. A massacre began, claiming thousands of lives. Once again, a woman was declared to be the reason for it. The son of the Portuguese King Pedro secretly married Ini Circumflex de Castro. The king, fearing the political influence of Ini Circumflex's brothers, ordered the murder of his pregnant daughter-in-law. Upon learning of his beloved's murder, Pedro rebelled against his own father, plunging the country into a bloody civil war. Ini Circumflex did not seek power, she only loved. Her life was taken away because of male paranoia, and her death became a banner for rebellion. Now stop for a moment and think. Behind almost every great war, behind every fall of an empire, there is the shadow of a woman who was not asked. Girls who were given to old men for the sake of alliances. Wives who were killed for the sake of succession to the throne. Victims of violence whose suffering was turned into political slogans. She was only 7 years old. She had childish braids, thin fingers, and a crown that she never touched. She did not know that grown men were already deciding her fate, her body, her future. She did not know that her name would become the cause of war. Her name was Margaret, the Norwegian maiden. Although she lived in Norway, a series of tragic events and coincidences made her the sole legitimate heir to the Scottish crown. But where there is a crown, there are always hunters. King Edward I Longshanks of England saw this event as an opportunity to conquer Scotland peacefully. He decided to arrange a legal marriage between Margaret and his son, who was only 10 years old. A political agreement is concluded, the Treaty of Salisbury. On paper, guarantees of Scottish independence. In reality, gradual subjugation to London. Margarita is no longer a child. She is now a strategic tool. Little Margarita is sent by sea to her coronation in Scotland. On the Orkney Islands, she falls ill. Fever, weakness, silence, Margarita dies. And the world of men collapses. The throne is empty. Chaos ensues. 13 Scottish lords claim the throne. Edward Longshanks prepares to invade. Finally, the English king sends troops into Scotland. The 30 Years' War for Scottish independence begins. Rivers of blood, huge numbers of victims. Ivan III's daughter was married to Alexander, Grand Duke of Lithuania. Ivan III made his son-in-law swear that Alina would not be forced to convert to Catholicism. When relations between the states became tense, Ivan III declared that Catholics were oppressing his daughter, and used this as a perfect ideological pretext to start a difficult Russian-Lithuanian war. Alina, who loved her husband, tearfully begged her father to stop, but who cared about a woman's feelings when territories were at stake. Do you think men are being disingenuous when they say they did all these crazy things for women? Which of these stories upsets you the most? Share your opinion in the comments, because this is just the beginning. Ahead of us lie the age of enlightenment and modern times, where methods will become more sophisticated, but the essence, alas, will remain the same. Subscribe to the channel and see you soon.